Hello, 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 and welcome to another masterclass in conversation with the Alliance Theater. My name is Tinashe Kajese-Bolden. I am the Bold Artistic Director Fellow here at the Alliance, and I am so excited to be having this wonderful, very timely conversation with one of our very own trailblazers, Mr. Kenny Leon. You know, when you say his name, whether you do that in Atlanta or anywhere around the country, people immediately have a connection to him because of the kind of work that he does and that he always shows up authentically himself. I just think that. But I think it's important too just to remind us of Kenny's unbelievable list of credits and the work that he's done. Kenny was the founder and artistic director of True Colors Theater Company here in Atlanta. And prior to that, he was the artistic director of the Alliance Theater for 11 years. He is a Tony Award-winning Broadway and film director. He is an actor, a teacher, a writer, a producer. The list just goes on. His Broadway credits include, most recently, A Soldier's Play, Much Ado About Nothing, Children of a Lesser God, Stick Fly, the 2014 revival of A Raisin in the Sun, starring Denzel Washington, for which he won the Tony Award for Best Direction of a Play and Best Revival, among many other Broadway and off-Broadway productions. Kenny's recent film works include Netflix American Son with Kerry Washington, which he also directed on Broadway. And other television credits include Hairspray Live and The Wiz Live, the Lifetime TV adaptation of Steel Magnolias. Kenny has worked and taught extensively all over the world, South Africa, in Ireland. He is a graduate of Clark Atlanta and is an honorary PhD recipient of Clark Atlanta and Roosevelt University. He is currently serving as the Denzel Washington Chair at Fordham University. But I think that the title we all immediately think of is Trailblazer and Atlanta's own Mr. Kenny Leon. Hey.
Hey, how are you? Good to see you. Good to be here.
Good. You look healthy. I like your red hat. You always, what's your sneaker game? You've always got sneaker game.
Absolutely. It's good to be here. And thanks to my friends at Adidas, have a good sneaker game.
Even in quarantine.
Absolutely.
Very. So I had mentioned in the intro, you went to Clark Atlanta, but you didn't go right into your professional acting and directing career right out of college, did you?
No. I actually was a political science major while I was attending Clark College. And that's because my grandmother and my mother raised me, and they always saw me being something that they knew about. So I was going to be a minister or teacher or a lawyer. And I was supposed to go to law school, but while I was at Clark, I hung around with some people like Samuel L. Jackson and Bill Nunn and Tanya Richardson Jackson. And theater became my minor. And while I was studying political science to go to law school, and I actually went to one year of law school in Los Angeles, California, and found my way back to Atlanta because law school was not for me. And I actually started working at the Academy of Music and Theater, known as the Academy Theater. Frank Whittow was the artistic director. And that was because I had to stay a year out of law school before I was going to return to law school. Came back to Atlanta. They had an audition in the paper for the artist in school, high school, improvisational acting team. And I auditioned for that, and I got that. And so we would do workshops in prisons and in schools, and then we would perform plays at night, like Hamlet or Richard III. Long story short, after doing that for that year, I was approached by Frank, and his thing was, would you like to go back to law school, or do you want to do this? And I said, I want to do this. And at that time I was making maybe $200 a week, but I was working in prisons and working in these schools and acting in this company. And I felt life couldn't be any better than that. So my artistic life started in Atlanta, Georgia, just like my college life started in Atlanta, Georgia.
It sounds like that, like so central to the Academy Theater was their community outreach. And there was like this link between like social activism and also doing the art. Did you realize that that was shaping the kind of artist you wanted to be and the kind of director you wanted to be? Or is it?
Yeah, it slowly shaped it, because also you got to understand, I was a political science major coming from St. Petersburg, Florida. And the first person I met in Atlanta, Georgia was a guy by the name of Maynard Jackson, who was the first Black mayor here. And I'm like, wow, I'm meeting a Black mayor. And then I met Black bankers and Black teachers, and which was so different than what I experienced in Florida. And so politics has always been a part of my soul and my spirit. And so it married really well with the Alliance Theater, with the Academy Theater, in terms of, doing the work and seeing the social implications of the work. I did a thing with a playwright by the name of Barbara Lebo called People of the Brick, where we actually recruited homeless people and taught them acting skills, and then put their stories on the stage at the 14th Street Playhouse, which used to be the Academy Theater, which is now Skaggs Center. So politics and storytelling has always been a part of my life, but the key that changed my life was the way Frank worked was through improvisational technique. So once I got grounded in the beauty of improvisation, then it was like striking gold, because even to this day, I find that most actors, they stand next to truth or beside truth, but never in truth. And all of my skills in improvisational technique has taught me how to get at the truth, no matter what I'm doing. If it's Shakespeare, if it's August Wilson, if it's Tennessee Williams, there is a way to get at the authentic truth that's grounded in the individual that's delivering that truth. So I try to guide actors there, and then I try to get out the way, and I try to use my raw sense of my approach to life to say, hey, that's fucked up, that's good, that's not working, I don't believe that. And it's never about my ego, it's about finding the truth that only the specific actor can bring to the material.
Don't you think also, like with finding that truth, that person has to be able to be comfortable with themselves and know themselves and be able to show up authentically, all of themselves? I think that's something about you that has always struck me, is that I always know what I'm getting. Like you show up, you are who you are, and you are very unapologetic about it. And I think initially that to a person who might not be comfortable yet or hasn't figured out who they are as an artist, that can be intimidating. Have you always been really sure of yourself? Like, were you ever, what did you learn any lessons as an early director out of mistakes you made, or when you weren't living in your truth?
Wow. I think that so much of my directing is tied into my acting that it goes back to that. And being an actor who was grounded in improvisational technique, always working off the other people around you. If your eyes did this, what did that make my eyes do? I was always taught to work with, what's real? How does the air smell? What does this table feel like? So I always need, as an actor, I always need other giving, willing actors opposite me. So my directing has always been tied to that. And after about 7 or 8 years with the acting company, I had the opportunity to direct. So I directed a play called The Wishing Place by Beverly Trader right there in Atlanta. And when I experienced directing for the first time, and this was a crazy play, a play about, snow coming in through the kitchen and leaves falling off a tree, falling into the bedroom. And it was just a very out there play. But I experienced something that I hadn't ever experienced as an actor. So when I'm an actor, I'm always figuring out, how my slice of the pie fits to the whole. And when I started directing, I realized, oh my God, I got to know how sweet the potatoes are. I have to know what the crust is like. I have to know how much is a pinch of sugar. And that was so thrilling to me. I felt in that exact moment, I felt like God was telling me, okay, I let you play around with this acting thing, but you're to serve me as a director. So even when I go back, when I act every couple of years, but I'm always only acting to learn more how to be better as a director, how to relate to the actors, how to talk about, how to get them from being stuck. And I think that any good director has to be able to teach a young actor, and he has to be able to help a veteran actor get unstuck. And if you can't do those things, I don't think you're a good director or a good storyteller. And I also think that a director has to set the tone, to paint the parameter, and then get out of the way. I don't know. Is that what you had? What did you ask me?
That's what you asked me? I think that's absolutely it. But it came from this sense of your confidence, I think, in yourself, and then it then goes into your work. But I also think confidence and vision is so essential for a director and for a leader, so that people trust where you're going to take them.
Well, I also think that when you get to the place where you know that you are doing what you know you're supposed to be doing, then there's a spiritual connotation to that, because I trust that I am on the planet to be a director, regardless of how I got here, regardless of what other people may think. So I can step into a room with Denzel Washington or Samuel L. Jackson or Danielle Brooks or Tinashe Bolden. I can step into those rooms confident about what I have to bring, because I have no other part of my ego that's in the way or in the room. So a quick story was when I worked with Denzel the first time, we did a show called Fences by August Wilson. And we met in LA. Producer Scott Rudin put us together and said, well, I want to, produce Fences on Broadway. And this was after August had passed away. And Denzel wants to do Troy, and, it only makes sense that the two of you do this together, because, you've done, all of his plays. So we met together in LA at the Beverly Hotel and got to know each other. And we liked each other right away. And then we looked at our calendar and said we were free on February 3rd, 2014. And we said, let's go for this. Let's do this play. But what comes with working with any artist is trust. Trust is the key thing in any rehearsal process. So meeting in a hotel room, that was not enough to gain complete trust, like the complete trust I have that God would deliver me to do positive projects. So I remember the first day of rehearsal, and Viola Davis was playing his wife, and I said, so Dee, why don't you cross downstage? And I'm blocking the show. Why don't you cross downstage and sit on that sawhorse? I think that'll work. And Dee looked at me and he says, why would I do that? I was like, whoa. And I remember saying, well, I think it'll help because we need to get Rose out of the house, and you have stuff that you haven't said to her, and it'll give you a chance to play around and figure out what you're going to say to her in the authentic, real moment. And he said, And I said, but you know what? You're Denzel. You're the great Denzel Washington, and you know what? You don't have to do that. You don't have to do anything that I asked you to do. But you know what? Let's go to scene 2. Let's skip that. And so I went on and went to the next scene and finished that day. The next day in rehearsal, Denzel walks up to me and he says, Leon, about yesterday. You were right. And from that moment on, we were locked hand in hand, because he's a brilliant actor. But I think he was trying to find a way to really trust me. Mm-hmm. And my response to him was satisfied his thirst for trust, because I was confident, because God had given me that sense of confidence. I wasn't there trying to cater to the star. I wasn't trying to do that. I was like trying to just get the play done the best I know how. And I was confident enough in a room full of other actors to say, hey, let's do this. And the same thing happened when I worked with Samuel L. Jackson on Broadway in The Mountaintop. You know, it's like one day Sam was like, I said, yo, Sam, we should start that scene over here. And he said, the fuck you talking about? The fuck out. And he starts, he coming at me. But I've been knowing Sam as a friend for like 30 or 40 years. And I was like, because the fuck I said it. Come on, motherfucker, come on, do this shit. And he's like, well, fuck you. And everybody in this room who didn't know us, they were like, oh my God, they're getting in an argument. Leon is going at that. And then Sam turns around and we start laughing. He said, yeah, I got that. Okay, yeah, you're right. Let's do this. So I say that to say that it's all about trust. It's all about trust. And even as an actor and a director, it's about trusting what's on the page. I always tell people what will make a great production in terms of everything you can give to it. And at the end of the day, that's all you can do, give all you have to it. So don't let anyone ever outwork you. Mm-hmm. But it's about trust and faith and the written word. Trust and faith in each other as actors, and trust and faith in the director as the leader of this army. Now, you can have a great, okay show without either one of those. But the shows that really work is when actors find a way to go up a hill, to follow that director, even when they are in doubt. Because you use the rehearsal process to find a way to trust them. Yeah. So if you're an actor and you're constantly late every day, then that's going to be hard for your fellow actors to find a trust with you because you're late. So then subconsciously, you'll start covering for that person who's late in real life. You'll find a way to cover for them in our pretend life, because like they're not going to be there. They're not going to come through that door on time because they're always late. Same thing with written word. If you don't trust the written word, you're going to take an August Wilson play and you're going to rewrite it to fit your rhythm. I've seen so many actors trying to find things to fit their rhythm. You're trying to find the rhythm and the truth of this character. So you're trying to find a way. Why did August write the instead of but? Why did August write 3 syllables rather than a 2-syllable word here? Why did August write this? So it's all about trust. And when you find that trust, I find that there's no telling where you can go, because I'm more interested in what I don't know than what I do know. And I love to be in a room with actors who don't think they know the answers. And the first thing about, directing is like, let's see what the actors got first. let's see what the artists in the room, the artists may be able to solve your problems, and you don't have to put that pressure on yourself as a director. So I always say, like, let me see what the actors got first. Let me see where they are, and then we'll figure out where the holes are.
But that ability to be present and trust, the trust goes both ways, but you are able to be nimble with it because you have done, as a director, so much preparation. And I'm just about your preparation when I think about, you've just been able to just seamlessly work in television and film and contemporary plays and Shakespeare plays. That the preparation for each one, I'm imagining, is different, but it still traffics in the same way. Like, I want you to tell me.
We've worked together a couple of times, and I love working with you. You're such a smart actor and director. But actually, for me, it's the same process every time. It's the same process for Shakespeare as it is for an episode of Dynasty, as it is for an August Wilson play. For me, you have different tools and you have different tone and you have, it's just a different medium. So the key is to understand the tools that you have in each medium and what makes each medium stronger. But every time I get a script, I just got hopefully, God willing, I'm going to do a film at the end of this year. But I just got that. And the first thing I do is I read it. Even if the play, and we come to theater, I read it. Comes to television, I read it. But listen to this. I read it 5 times. I read a script 5 times without forming an idea of what the play is or where it is, or I just read it straight through 5 times without trying to figure out what it is. Once I read it 5 times, even if it's an old play, even if it's Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, I'm doing a new production of Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, I read it 5 times. If it's a new production of a soldier's play, like I just finished on Broadway, I read it 5 times. Read it, put it down, read it. Then I write on a piece of paper what comes to my mind. What words come to mind? What words are in my head now? Is it fluidity? Is it patriotism? Is it love? Is it anger? So whatever those words are, that gives me a base for creating an atmosphere for the world of the play. I said, and then I'm always trying to see how the play or how the story works in our present life. So even if I did a music episode of Dynasty last year. And then before that, I did a thing for Will Packer called Ambitions. But I'm always like, okay, the people watching this are living today. So I'm not trying to create it for dead people. I'm trying to create something that works for people and that impacts their lives now. So if it's The Wiz, if it's Tennessee Williams, The Night of the Iguana, I'm saying, why should I listen to that story now? How does that impact me now? So I always read things 5 times and I find a word for it or words or metaphor for it. And then I call in a set designer and I always speak to the set designer alone. And then together we create a world to tell the story. And I'm always looking at ways to tell the story today. So even when I did A Raisin in the Sun, I did that twice on Broadway. I did it, my first Broadway show with P. Diddy and Felicia Rashad and Audrey McDonald and Sanaa Lathan was A Raisin in the Sun. And the 10th play that I did on Broadway was Raisin in the Sun with Denzel Washington and LaTanya Richardson Jackson. And
do you remember,
say,
Kenny, do you remember, you know that you and I, we were in rehearsal for Blue by Charles Randolph Wright in Cincinnati.
Right.
And a week into our rehearsal, you were like, I gotta go to New York. I got a Broadway show, I gotta rehearse. And you were doing both of those shows going back.
But the real story is that because I am also the type of person, I wrote a book last year called Take You Wherever You Go. And it's a line my grandmother used to say. So you got to be true to yourself always. And I'm not a type of person that would leave a show that I had started on. But actually, the artistic director there, I think Ed Stern, I got offered the Broadway show while I was directing Blue with you guys. And he said to me, you have to do Broadway, Kenny. You cannot pass on that. And then you guys as actors were so supportive of that. You got to do that. And then what Ed said was, but I need you to find a director of your caliber who can come in and take over the show during Tech Week. And God bless us. So Surrett Scott ended up being that director. But it was that artistic director who thought it was so important that as a Black man that I go to Broadway to direct that show, that is willing to sacrifice my time at his regional theater in Cincinnati. So that's a very special time for me. And I did do both those things at the same time. Flash forward to many years later when, after knowing August Wilson for a long time, when he did his 9th play on Broadway, Jim of the Ocean, which I acted as Citizen Barlow in the first production of Jim of the Ocean, which a lot of people don't know that, but I created the role of Citizen Barlow, and that was a great honor to work with August in Chicago on that show. And then I left that show and came back to Atlanta because I was just, doing that acting gig for 5 weeks. And then I had to come back to Atlanta, where I was artistic director, getting ready to leave as artistic director. But I did, actually, Georgia Ensemble gave me an opportunity to do a Shakespearean play entitled Much Ado About Nothing. So, and I did Much Ado About Nothing. And I tell you, to this day, I have no idea what that play was about back then. No idea. And I can admit that now. Like, I didn't know what I was doing, but I had some great, wonderful actors, you know, Carolyn Cook and Chris Cajun, and people said it was a great production. But flash forward to now, when I did the play at Shakespeare in the Park in New York, I really knew what I was doing. I really knew the choices I wanted to make. I really was confident in myself as a director. So it's really amazing how things come back like that.
And you couldn't have imagined, I mean, you set your production last year in spring of 2020.
Right. Yeah, because.
Yes, no, you please talk about it.
Because in Much Ado, Much Ado, you're like, okay, I hadn't done Shakespeare in a while, so I was a little nervous about it. But then I met with a Shakespearean scholar at Columbia, and I love research. So I love preparation. I love reading about the time period. I love just throwing myself into whatever play it is. And so I had these classes every weekend at Jim Shapiro's home. And I loved it. It was so great. And he said, look, people have overly formalized Shakespeare in America. We've gotten to the point where we just try to recreate what the Brits did. And it just sounds like really bad plays. And so I haven't seen a lot of great Shakespeare. So in studying with him, he was like, okay, first of all, take Shakespeare off the shelf, pull him down to be just a man. He was a man just like August Wilson was a man. He was a poet like August was a poet. And so he says he did his plays for the common people. So let's start there. And then you read Shakespeare and Much Ado, the opening scene, it says, men coming from war.
Yeah.
And I'm like, coming from war? Okay, so I have to decide as a director, my job is to figure out what war is this, so I can communicate that to the actors. And then I was like, every war I would think about, it did not feel authentic. I was like, no, we can't set it in the Middle East. No, we can't set it in Vietnam. No, not World War I. Didn't feel honest and right. And I said, so it has to be a war in the future. Okay, Shakespeare. I said it's a war in the future. Okay, what is that war, Kenny Leon? Well, it's a war in 2020, right before the 2020 election. That's the politics in me coming out. Wow. So I said, can I set it there in 2020? He said, absolutely. Now he says, okay, he says, these people are in a community. Okay, what community are they in? Well, they're in Italy, as Shakespeare's written it, but that's just what he knew. If Shakespeare was alive today, what would he say? Well, okay. And then I said, what he says is Oregon, Italy. Okay, well, wait a minute. I live in Cobb County. Wait, look on the map. It's a place called Oregon, Georgia. Oh, whoa. Okay. I'll set it in Oregon, Georgia. Whoa, in 2020, right before the election. Oh, and also close to Cobb County is a county that's kind of purplish, kind of maybe turning blue. That's interesting. Oh, and the play is about upper middle class family. Oh, whoa. Well, people in Atlanta, there's a huge Black community there, and they're upper middle class. I know a lot of upper middle class Black people in Atlanta. Yeah. So that's how I started deciding where to set the play. And then once I did that, I was like, okay, I don't want to change any of the words. I want to use all of Shakespeare's words. So how can I let the audience know that we are in Oregon, Georgia in 2020? And at that time, I knew a very good friend of mine who is a great politician, Stacey Abrams. And she had, it was right before the whole governor, right during the governor thing. And I called her up and I said, can I use your name and the year to put on a poster to put on my set? She said, absolutely. So I set the place in Oregon, Georgia with this house, and then I put a political banner that says Stacey Abrams 2020. And you should know, when I was trying to when we conceptualize this, you know, a lot of people got nervous. Oh, what does that mean? Is it political? Is it, you know, what are you trying to say? I said, I'm just trying to set the place. And I was trying, and many people try to talk me out of it. I said, no, 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 we need that. And so when you open the play, Shakespeare's play is a brick home in Georgia with Stacey Abrams 2020. So thereby, you know where you are. And then I set an American flag in the yard because I wanted people to know that Black people love their country too, since all of the cast was going to be Black living in Georgia. And so I had a flag there. I ended up having a real car driven on stage because I wanted people to know it was really, really in the future and or really in our time. And so long story short, that's how I came about doing that. And then I find out in some of our, especially with Shakespeare, things that separate us are our rituals. You know, that's why, like, I love in August's plays, I see the ritual of Black people. You know what I mean? And sometimes you don't see our rituals on stage, you know, and that's the thing that separates us. We're all the same, white and Black, we're the same. The only thing that separates us is how we go to church, how do we go to funerals, how do we have circumcisions, how do we have weddings, how do we, you know. And so I was like, wow, so I have to do that in this place. So then every place that Shakespeare had, there's a song here. He didn't identify what the song had to be. He just started using the 1500s to say, oh, this is the kind of song that he was using at the time. And so every place that we had a song, I replaced it either with an existing song or a song composed by Jason, who was our music person. And so every musical thing applied specifically to African Americans in that production. And Camille Brown came and did some choreography because our dance separates us, our wedding separates us. So in my production of Much Ado, that play has 2 weddings. And research tells me that in Shakespeare times, it was against the law to sort of put church and state together. So you could in a play, you could not do religious things in a play that were meant for the church. So in most of his plays, if he has weddings there, they never get to the part of saying, I do. So something always breaks up the wedding, you know? So I made these long weddings in this production, but they never got to I do. But since our weddings are longer, we always have a Whitney Houston moment with a song. So I had a Whitney Houston moment. I had, you know, and lastly, a lot of Much Ado was about just how men were thinking at the time. And I knew that I couldn't, that's not what I wanted to stay in 2020. So I wanted women to have the upper hand because we were right at smack dab in the middle of the Me Too moment. And so every time when I saw that there was a place where 500 years ago, the woman would have lost, I tried to do something that said, like, for instance, these men lied on this woman. They lied on Hero. So that reminds me of today, all this fake news. Fake news damages communities. So they lied on her. They disgraced her. And so I had to have her have a comeback. So in the play, right before she goes back to Claudia, she slaps him so hard. And the audience every night, they cheered that moment. So, you know, that's just a little bit of how we came up with Much Ado. But they're all, I approach every play the same. Much Ado, I approach the same way as I did Blue, same way I did Raisin in the Sun, same way I do Hairspray Live.
That's so fantastic. I mean, the vision and the clarity and the agency that you gave the women was so clear just in the opening number with the song. Oh, that yeah. This is our story and we're going to tell it our way. And I thought that was, it was just so clear and really, really inspiring.
Well, what I do realize now as directors, sometimes I think we can do less. My fellow directors, we can just do less. We don't have to have all of the answers. And sometimes we don't have to overly direct. So, and that Much Ado as an example, it was like Shakespeare had a song in the beginning. So all I had to do was say, what song do I want to put in the beginning? So I decided to put in Marvin Gaye, What's Going On? Because we're in troubled times. And then I told Jason, I said, Jason, we can change this song, but this is as a placeholder. This is what I'm using. And we ended up keeping What's Going On in Our World.
I love that. Hey, I just want to say to our attendees who are watching this, please, I want to open this up to questions. This could go on forever, but we only have Mr. Leon until 3 o'clock. So please go ahead, raise your hand, and we will call upon you to ask questions. I'm going to just ask one last question while those are coming in. Really, and I know that's hard to be brief because your stories are so wonderful. I read this really amazing thing in your memoir where you gave this anecdotal story about somebody said, they said to you, let me get this quote out, that in life, every 7 to 10 years, you should leave a job or at least learn to make yourself over if you're going to stay in the same place. I just, I think that really speaks to your appetite for transformation and evolution. Has that always been a driving, like, is that what keeps you looking for the next project and not getting tunnel vision on the type of work, but you're constantly expanding how you're expressing yourself?
Well, I don't know. I think it's kind of spiritual, but I believe that once you stop growing, you're dead. And I think that life is for the living. And the short story about that, when I was artistic director of the Alliance Theater, I remember we got a big sum of money from Reader's Digest Fund, like $1 million for diversity initiatives. And the person who was heading the Reader's Digest came to Atlanta to make that announcement. And he says, okay, I'm going back to New York. I said, oh, I'm going to New York tomorrow. He said, well, I said, well, what time does your plane leave? He said, it leaves when I say it leaves. Oh, he had a private plane. And I had never been on a private plane. I'm just a country boy from Tallahassee, Florida. And so I go on this plane with him. And he says, so Kenny Leon, you just got $1 million. What are you going to do next? I'm like, what do you mean I'm doing next? I'm a country boy from Florida. I'm making, I don't know, maybe $150,000 at that time, a month. No, well, yeah, a year. That's a year. And yeah, a year. So I was like, he was like, yeah, but what are you going to do next? And that's when he said, every 7 to 10 years, you should start reinventing yourself because, and then so in retrospect, I remember when I left the Academy Theater to start directing, the short story is when I wanted to direct and not act so much, Frank Whitsaw, whom I love as artistic director, he said, I don't think you have the skills to direct. We would like for you to come back as a director. As an actor. Love for you to come back as an actor, but not as a director. And I said, wow, Frank, I love you, so I guess it's time for me to leave. And I left, in year 8 or whatever. Flash forward to being at the Alliance Theater, it was like in year 8 or something, I was on the golf course and I was like, I think I've done everything I'm supposed to do here. Because now, remember what the guy from Reader's Digest Fund, he told me 7, 8 years, yes, it's time for me to go. And at that time, Susan Booth had been doing some wonderful work for us. And I'm real proud of her, or excited to know her. I can't take credit for her greatness, but I'm so glad that she's there and doing the wonderful things at the Alliance Theater now. So I left the Alliance Theater because I felt like I had done everything I could in terms of diversity and inclusion. And that's what I set out to do. And I felt like, wow, they're so lucky to have Susan Booth, now a white woman, to stand on the ceiling of that, to sort of also embrace diversity and inclusion, and to see you sit in this chair, this artistic position, that's great. To see Pearl Clegg be involved there. So, all that worked out, And then, of course, I started True Colors after that. And then, a couple of years ago, I decided to leave True Colors after, actually, I left there, and it was after 12 or 13 years, I think. No, it was 14, 15 years. Anyway, the point was, it was a long time at True Colors, but if people would remember, 8 years ago, the company almost folded. And so I made a decision at that time to stay along with that wonderful staff there and help rebuild it until we got to this point. And then I discovered, probably a couple of years before I was gonna leave, that Jamil Jude it was his time and he was ready and I shouldn't be there. So I guess over the years, I've come to trust God that many of us become insecure. You know, we get our job and we just, oh, I got to have this. And I just think that every time I've made a change in my life, it's always worked out. So I don't want us to be prisoners of our position. If you're working at McDonald's and you're making a certain amount of money, but you know in your heart you are a writer, you could become a prisoner of working at McDonald's because you're like, that's paying for your babysitter, that's paying the house note, and you become, oh, I'm not doing that. Or if you really think you want to be a writer and you're acting in the community theater and you're like, well, but this little money I get from the community theater really helps me. And then you won't free yourself up to be that writer you should be. So I guess I've been blessed to learn that, you know, the security is not in the job position. The security is in trusting your heart and going for your passion and open yourself up for great things to happen.
That's so great, so great. Eddie, you have your hand up. You have a question for us, for Mr. Leon?
Hey, Tinashe, how are you?
I'm good.
Thank you so much for facilitating this conversation. My question to Mr. Leon is, you considering your origin in improvisation and the element of finding your truth within improvisation, are there examples of how you incorporate that into your work now in all these different mediums at such a large scale with such high power people involved?
Oh yeah. I treat people different but the same. if you know what I mean. It's like
like that would be amazing all around.
Yeah, like Denzel is going to get the same thing from me that an unknown first-time Broadway actor would get. But of course, we have a different relationship, and he will be treated differently based on his accomplishments. But I'm always, the first week, I want to know how everybody explores information. So the first week, without you even knowing it, I am just trying to watch how you take directions, how you listen, how you move, how mean you are, what kind of person you are. And I disguise it by saying, okay, this is going to be our where week. Well, first of all, I never sit around a table more than probably 2 days. So I don't want to sit around the table for a week because a lot of actors can talk, but not a lot of them can do. So I want to get them up as quick as I can. Then I get them up and I have what I call my where week. Let's understand where we're going. So I'm telling them where we're going. And I block the whole show in my head, but I don't force them to do my blocking. My blocking is a safety for me, like 5 weeks from now if nothing is working. But I'm letting them discover the blocking, and I work in a series of triangles. So I'm trying to see what works in these moving triangles in this production. The second week, I talk about who are you? And then I talk about the why. Then I talk about the whole, which is the whole thing together. And we learn for all these kinds of W's that we have, I put it all together. So there's a system to how I put things together. And then all of it is grounded in, are you saying that from an honest, truthful place? Are you looking into someone else's eyes? Are you using all 5 senses? So some actors only use one mode of communication. It's like, this is how I sound. I was at home looking in the mirror and I was looking at myself, but I was just recording, this is how I sound. So I have to keep saying to myself until it sounds right to me. So it sounds like that person is taking a chair outside of their face and sat in that chair and is looking at themselves. So now it's like I tell my wife, if I'm in the bed and she starts talking about a friend or somebody else, I was like, honey, there's too many of us in the bed. Just need to be you and me. So with an actor, I don't want 2 people. I just want you. So a lot of actors find it hard to just be that person. And so then I just look for those things that rings as true or that they're communicating. And all of that comes from using your 5 senses. If you look at, Denzel Washington did a movie called, I think it was The Magnificent Seven. And it's a simple movie, But he made it great because he had all these things he was doing with his hand. He would move the glass here and move the fork there, and you know, and then do this. And so he's using all 5 senses. So the great actors like Viola Davis, you're gonna see her, you like, wow, does she know how that kitchen smells when she's straightening her daughter's hair? I get a sense that she's smelling the room. Oh wow, now she's touching. She's using the sense of touch. Oh no, and now she's not saying anything. That's because she's listening. She's hearing something. So I get everybody to use that. Or if I see one of those 5 senses missing, I'll concentrate on that. And I said, she's not listening. So I might get another actor to repeat something, and the person is still saying it the same way. So you're not even listening. And then I was like, what is that railroad track smell like? So you can tell the actors who's using their whole body, and all that is grounded in improvisational text. So in improvisationally, you always are aware of everything. And the great actors, of all those things, the one that matters the most is listening. If you get an actor to listen, and you can tell when they're not listening, just keep working on them listening. And if they don't listen after day 8, then change actors, because they'll never be better than they are if they never listen. Because if you don't listen, you can't share the scene. You're only gonna like just pontificate the way you heard it at home, you know, talking to yourself.
Right. Well, thanks so much. Yeah, I totally can hear how you're using that as part to whole, right? That's fascinating. You have everything all set up, but you dissect it to kind of bring it all together to a larger picture.
But I also protect myself. Like I said, I'm in my hotel room. I have blocked the whole show, every movement, every tone, how I hear it, how I see it. But I'm flexible enough to release that to the universe. That's not what I want them to do. I want them to discover something that I did not see, because the great production comes from like, not what I saw, what you saw, is what we created together, that no one person created it. And at the end of the day, you're like, wow, I don't even know how that moment happened. But it took all of us. It took the set designer, light designer, every actor, and as deeply as I can go into this character to bring it forth.
That's so inspiring. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Eddie. Erica has a question for you, Kenny.
Okay.
Erica, thank you so much for listening in and your patience. You gotta unmute yourself, my dear.
Hey, hey.
Hey.
Leon, Tinashe, how you doing, Mr. Leon?
How are you?
I'm very good, thank you. This is like the highlight of the week. It just started, but it's already going great.
Great.
I'm so inspired by you, sir, and I'm just wondering, I'm just curious about, you know, what inspires you? Like, what book have you read that is your inspiration, or what play is your favorite play? And then also, because of right now, what's happening in our world, like, what are you reading now? What are you watching? What are you binging? What are you doing?
See me?
Days?
Can you see me? You can see me,
Yeah,
right?
I can see you.
Okay. I just watched 5 seasons of Breaking Bad.
That's a good one. That's a good one.
I realized I never saw it from the beginning. And once you see it from the beginning, it's so beautiful. It's so well crafted. And Bryan Cranston is a friend of mine, and his just depth of reach is incredible. They had a great company, but I also like the camera moves. You know, how they used camera underwater, camera through smoke. And so every night I have a film room. So I study film from an old movie like The Godfather, Jackie Brown, old movies like that. I even looked at Jungle Fever, Love and Basketball. And I have 3 movies coming up this year, so I'm trying to make sure I do that. But I get up, since the pandemic, I get up every day. And I'm one of those people that think this is good for us. And there's a woman I've been interested in doing her story on screen, which is Mahalia Jackson. And when I read about her recently, I've been reading about her, and I realized she came through the Depression. She came through the virus that was in 1918. She came through civil rights. She came, it's like, and we're complaining. I know this is a scary time, but we're complaining about that. But it's like many people that have had challenging lives. It's like, what do we do in the time? So it's like my mom always say, God is God in the good time and God is God in the troubled times. So every day I get up, I listen to an hour and a half of Mahalia Jackson. This is going on 7.5 weeks now. So I listen to her because her voice is like opera, gospel, blues, all together. Hour and a half of that every day. Then I get up, then I pray. And then I meditate, which I just recently started doing. And then I go and I do an hour on the Peloton. And then I read plays of not only plays that I want to do, but plays that I've forgotten about. And I look, and I love Tennessee Williams, so I go back and read his stuff. And then I do, I go and play with my grandson. And then I, at night, I do film study. I watch an old film, an old TV show. And I've been growing so much during these times. If you want to see, this is what I'm reading now. So.
I love. Oh, wow, man. The Ribbon Niger, yes. That's amazing.
You know, and then we get down here, we got James Baldwin and MLK.
Yes.
So, you know, and then I got, you know, because I'm doing a lot of film, you got this book here, Shot by Shot. So I'm using this time to study, to pray, so that when things jump back off, I'm ready to jump in the water. And that's the best we could do. You know, you got to worry about the things you can control, and you got to let the things go that you can't control. And I'm just one of those people that believe that God's in control, and it's still incumbent upon us to make the world better through our storytelling. And we should be better artists. If you're the same artist on the other side of this pandemic, then you don't know nothing. And I love the fact that the Alliance Theater and Susan Booth and Tinashe are even taking this time for artists to spend time talking with each other. You know, we don't even have this time to discuss and let each other know what we're doing. And so anyway, I wish you every success, but I try to keep reading, and I want to encourage all of us to don't stop working. Don't stop working just because things have slowed down.
Yes, indeed. Thank you so much, Mr. Leon. Thank you, Tinashe.
Thank you, Erica. That's so true, Kenny. And I think it's really inspiring for all of us to see, especially artists like you who've had so much success, to hear that you're still sharpening every tool and you're still keeping yourself, you know, relevant at your own standards. You keep raising your own game. So
absolutely. It's like I one of my great people, and you say, who do you have as mentors? It's like Felicia Rashad still takes voice lessons and dance classes, you know, and she's a 70-year-old actor, you know. I talked to Samuel L. Jackson the other day. He's at home working out in his house, keeping sure his body is fit at 72. You know, if I just want to keep working, and I know my best work is yet ahead. You know, some people are like, whoa, you did this. It's like, what? No, I got something else to give the world. And there are ways as artists that we got to keep impacting the world. And as our political world lets us down, we have to look into our artistic world. And maybe we're the answers. Maybe it's not the church. Maybe it's not our politicians. Maybe it's us. Maybe it's the writers. Maybe it's directors. But we have to be stronger on the other side if we're going to be those artistic leaders.
We have so many more questions. I know we're not going to get to all of them, but I'm just going to take one last question from Brandon. Hey, Brandon. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Tinashe, for doing this. Mr. Leon, thank you so much for agreeing to be a part of this. I was lucky enough to work with the great Chuck Smith on Gem of the Ocean. And there's just so much wisdom you can get from that man. But I was curious, what are any notes or things that you've learned from Chuck or even other great Black theatrical directors like George C. Wolfe or Lloyd Richards? Like, what are things that you've wanted to take from them or learn from them?
Well, I think we can learn from everybody around us, you know. I mean, I think Chuck is great, and Chuck is a great colleague. And when I look back, I think, you know, like Lloyd Richards was great for me because he always made time for other people. You know, when I was artistic director at the Alliance Theater, there wasn't any Black people running American theater, you know. And now you got Nataki and other people like at Oregon Shakespeare Festival and stuff like that. But we didn't have that. So I didn't know who to reach out to. And I called Lloyd up and he said, young fella, come by. And I went up to Yale in New Haven and spent time with him. And we broke bread and he was a serious mentor forever. And I remember when I did A Raisin in the Sun on Broadway the first time, because he created it in 1959. And I reached out and talked to Lloyd, and I called Ruby Dee and Ossie Davis, who were involved in the original production. And I said, look, I'm part of the process. I'm never trying to outdo what you guys did. And I think we have to understand that we're all linked together. It's not a competition. And I remember Lloyd said, look, I want to be there for for your opening night on Broadway, but I can't be there because if I'm there, it sort of takes something away from what we did in 1959. But you have to know that I'm your biggest fan, and I want this to be a huge success. And he did not come to opening, but he sent me this big basket of flowers. And Ruby Dee and Ossie Davis, I said, come by anytime. All doing previews in tech of A Raisin in the Sun in 2004, Ruby Dee and Ossie Davis was there every night. Ruby Dee gave me notes, and all of her notes happened to be about Beneatha, because she told me before, she said that was the role that she sort of kind of wanted to do when Lloyd asked her to do it, you know. But so I always honor those who have come before me. So I love Ossie and Ruby, and I was glad I had the time to spend with them. Lately, I've been spending some time with Harry Belafonte, because I want to tell his story on stage. And so just sitting with Harry, you know, every month, listening to him just tell about how challenging it is to be an actor and an activist, in which he was all of that. You know, he's everything I want to be. So it's like, so I love him. And I remember when we did Holla If You Hear Me on Broadway, and I was saddened that the show had closed earlier than I thought. And I was walking down the street, and Mr. Belafonte was getting out of a taxi with Cornel West. And he said, Brother Leon. I said, hey, how you doing? I said, I don't know, man. Holla If You Hear Me is closing early, so I'm sort of disappointed, but I'm so glad that you got to see it and you got to talk to the young people. He said, what are you talking about? You're forgetting something. You have to remember that you're presenting Afrocentric work on a Eurocentric stage. We are so blessed to have you open these doors and tell these stories, and don't you get it confused. It ain't always about the box office. And from that moment in 2014 on, I sort of reconfigured the way I think. And the great Belafonte was saying, don't believe what these people are telling you. Do the work for the right reason. So now when I do work, you know, you want to make that bread, but it's not, that's not what's guiding me. You know, it's like, you know, I was supposed to open that door to do the Tupac musical, you know, and right after Tupac happened, you know, I'm not responsible for it, but, you know, Hamilton did happen right after that, you know. So sometimes you're just part of the process, you know, and so I understand that. So I love Belafonte. I remember the time when Denzel and I was working on Raisin in the Sun, and Denzel, we had breakfast. He says, I want to take you somewhere. I said, okay. He got in the car with him. We go to this house. We get out. A woman comes to the door. Come on in. We go inside, and it's Sidney Poitier. And it's like, oh my God, Sidney Poitier and Denzel Washington. I said, wow, come on in. 3 hours later, I'm sitting in there, and Mr. Poitier and Denzel, the three of us. No cameras were there, nobody, but to be in that room with Denzel and Sir Sidney, it was like a blessing for me. And so, you know, and he was just encouraging us. So one of the things I remember, I said, you know, I got this idea of doing Raisin in the Sun with Denzel, because, you know, I think that Walter Lee should be played as an older person, because that's one thing as Black artists we don't do. We don't make our stories fresh for a new generation. We have to go in and look at it again, dig it up, and make it fresh. A lot of our stuff is very didactic to the period. And I said, so many people, some people have said, I don't know if Denzel should play this because he's older. And I remember the exact words that Sidney Poitier said. And you got to understand, he's a very classic guy. He says, fuck him. And he said that Denzel's the only one who can do justice to this role, and it's about finding the essence of this man. And so there are people like that. There are people like I had the opportunity to work with Toni Morrison on her great work, Maya Angelou, and you learn something from all these people. But you also have people that you look up to, like Reverend Joseph Lowry, who died recently. He was my first minister out of college, you know what I'm saying? And I followed him around the Cascade United Methodist Church for 40 years, you know what I mean? And he was a man he was an artist in his own self. He was a politician, showed me how to live life. I mean, from afar. I can't claim him, but I'm saying he was a person that was a mentor. My grandmother, who had 13 children, who people like that never see their homes in the daytime, because they leave work, it's dark, when they come home, it's dark, So I understand that what we're doing is a part of a process and a part of a little bit of all those people. And so as an artist, I try to live a life that is worthy of my grandmother's memory and my great-grandmother's memory. And I really want to be in a country where there's no distinction between white and Black, other than we're different and we're culturally different. But in terms of access and hearing our stories, we should tell everybody's stories, hear everybody's stories. So I got a lot of mentors. The great Marion McClinton was, was the great one, and Stan Lathan, who is Sanaa Lathan's dad, was the only person that opened the door to me. After I made my first TV movie, he opened the door and he sat down and talked with me for 2 hours. And sometimes people get so jealous in this business, they don't want to sit down and share with you what they know. And Stan has always been like that. And I always give him the credit for putting that in me. So I always say, what's for me is for me, and what's for somebody else is for somebody else. Jealousy is the wrong thing to have as an artist. And so I learned from a lot. I learned from the great Chris Manos from Atlanta, who ran Theater of the Stars. Bob Farley, who gave me the first opportunity at the Lions Theater as associate artistic director. Frank Whittow, of course. Janice Schaefer, great writer. And I'm glad to call Atlanta home. I tell you, when I was on Radio City Music Hall receiving the Tony Award, I mean, for a country boy like me to get that award, it's not about the awards, it's about the work. But that award gives you fuel to do more work. And all I could think about on that stage was like all the wonderful people in Atlanta, the patrons, the board of directors, the people that you encounter along the way, even the people that you think you don't like coming up. Every person you bump into on your way, on your journey of life, is sort of a mentor. So I think all of those people. I don't think life is a mistake. I don't think where we end up is a mistake. And I just want to keep working, because I don't think I got a long way before I'm done. There's a lot of stories we need to tell and a lot of lives we need to impact. I hope I answered your question.
No, you did. Thank you so much. And I love Atlanta too, proud Morehouse grad. So it's all right. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kenny. We have so many questions that are still out there, but I would say this: if you have not read Kenny's biography, Take You Wherever You Go, I promise you every question you have and more will be answered so truthfully and authentically in that book. It is a beautiful memoir and a real inspiration that you can overcome any background that you have any upbringing you've come from, and the world is your oyster. And I thank you so much, Kenny, for taking this time to talk to us And when you're in the city, you always take the time to reach out and connect with artists. And we are so grateful for your work, for the opportunities you've made for so many different artists here and on the national scale. And we just reach out to you, a virtual hug, stay safe, keep doing what you're doing. And thank you to all of you who were listening in. Please stay safe, take care of yourselves, and we will see you again next time. We appreciate you, Kenny.
Thank you. Love y'all.
Love you.